So are you saying if you can't draw two circles together that you can't really sculpt? Or
No.
you have to be
Not at all.
a fairly decent artist? Okay.
Certainly can't draw. Yeah.
Okay, and as far as like the medium that you use, because I can't draw two circles together, but I like to sculpt, so I pick up, started out with a chunk of clay, and something forms and it's terrific to a point, but then if I haven't picked the right medium, 30 hours later, it's destroyed for some reason. So any one of you, what is your preferred medium to use? Sculpting?
I think first of all, you got to realize, I think 30 hours invested is 30 hours of education.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you have to look at it. You screw something up, you learn from it, you move on, Mediums vary. If you want to bang something out, you really need to bang it out, you need to use a different medium. But if you know something, you want to get crisp or whatever, if there's some company that demands a certain places only want sculpting, right? I think doesn't Bowen only have like sculpting-based sculptures for the most part?
That's a good question. I think some of those guys just cast a link.
Does it?
You find one easier to use?
Me and Jarrod like super sculpting.
Don't you guys, I think, don't you guys use Sculpting Firm Gray?
Right.
Yes.
I hate that stuff. I use Super Sculpting Gray Soft.
There you go.
But because the firm just, I feel like I need to have more ability to push it around and correct it. To me, sometimes sculpting is, I continue to make it wrong until finally I land on, when I happen to land on it being right, and I've got to be able to change it fast. They're very successful with Sculpting Firm, but they came out with a gray, and they do it in various densities, and I like the Sculpting Gray Soft. So.
We like super sculpting. A lot of companies don't want you to use that now, possibly. They might ask you to work in wax, what have you. We like it. I know Takea uses super sculpting. I know Claymore uses it. That's good enough for me. I mean, that's what we like. As Clay told me once, someone said to him, but you can't get detail in super sculpting. And Clay said back, no, you can't get detail.
That's right. That's what people tell me all the time.
I think that one thing that, depending on what you're trying to do, really, if you're just starting to sculpt, if it's just use water-based clays, wet clay, those type of things are easier to manipulate. You'll be able to build up form very quickly. But I think in the long run, the trick is to get yourself exposed to all different kinds of clays, because you might have your own preference. We might use super sculpting, someone else might prefer wax. You might do well with just water-based clay. If you're doing a piece of jewelry, where you might want to do some super fine detail, you might want to do some carving, you might have to pick a harder clay versus a softer one where you can just build a form. So it really depends on the project. But if you're just getting started out, I would say just go with the water-based clay and try to build up the form correctly, because that is really very important for a sculpture. Without a form, without a soul, any kind of details in the world, it's not gonna get the job done.
Yeah, there are actually, that's an extremely good point. When it comes to sculpture or drawing or any art form, I think you can name, form is everything and the details are nothing. You don't see little tiny pores and little tiny fine little wrinkles all over Michelangelo's work, but it looks real because the form is perfect, essentially. Also, what you said is very true. 30 hours spent on something is 30 hours worth of learning. And also, when you have a sculpture that you're working on, or a drawing, or whatever it is, and something just isn't right, and you're frustrated, and you're angry, and oh God, it just doesn't look right. Those are the best times. Because that means you're learning. Your eye is improving because you know something's wrong. It's when you think, ha-ha, masterpiece, genius, I'm going to show this to the world. And the world sees it and goes, that means you blew it. You know, it's when you know something's wrong. And believe me, I see it in my work all the time.
Yes,
You know.
sculpting, it's almost like sculpting is a constant effort to correct the mistakes that you're
That's
seeing
right.
that's wrong with it. That's almost the definition of what you're doing. Yeah.
I also want to give a shout out though, oil-based clay. One thing that's good about oil-based clay, as opposed to water clay, you know, take it, tear it down and start over, unlike water clay, which kind of, once it loses a certain elasticity, it's kind of done. Wet clay has glycerin in it, which keeps it moist for a longer period of time. And that makes it an ideal medium for large things like this. But for things, for someone just starting out, start with stuff like maquettes. Start with things, you know, like model pit scale. And oil clay is terrific.
People often get caught up in another thing that relates to the portfolio thing and sculpting in general in this business is that people do get too caught up too quickly in the details of the piece. Like you're saying, with the eyes and those little tiny details when they have missed on the form. Sculpture is a form in space. It begins and ends as a form in space. It should look from several feet back. It should work. When you move forward and you're finishing the piece, then fine, put the details in. But I've seen so many people waste so much time on a sculpture that doesn't work from the beginning. And you waste a lot of time. And maybe you're right that it's a learning experience, but unfortunately sometimes, you know, you'd rather have saved yourself that time.
We constantly, me and Jarrod, get up from the table and walk away as far as you can. If you can get 40, 50 feet, you know, from it, and look back at it. Because if you're this close to it for hours on end, that's all you're seeing, you know, is the close-up. And you've got to get the big picture.
Yeah, these guys are real good at that. Their figures are dramatic and dynamic and just beautiful male. The forays are down female. They understand intuitively, it looks to me like it's intuitive, that this form, this emotion comes out of the form first. And that's something that you capture within a pretty short amount of time. Just pushing the material around.